I went to my mountain lodge to find peace and found my brother, his wife, and his in-laws living there. When he screamed, "What do you want, you parasite? I'm calling the cops," I just said, "Go ahead if you can," and walked right into my own living room. Then I watched his whole world burn. I'm 34, and I bought this lodge 2 years ago with my own money. Every penny came from the software company I built while my brother coasted through life on handouts. Our parents died when I was 28. After the funeral, he asked to borrow $15,000. I said no for the first time ever. We barely spoke after that. He married someone 8 months ago. Didn't invite me. 3 days ago, I got a security alert at 2:00 a.m. Someone had accessed the lodge using the emergency code I'd given my brother years earlier. I checked the cameras remotely. My brother, his wife, her parents, and her sister were unloading suitcases. They weren't visiting. They were moving in. I watched them carry my things to the garage. My grandmother's quilt, the one she spent 3 years making, tossed in a corner. My grandfather's vintage poker set from Vietnam, shoved in a box. My mom's jewelry from the bedroom safe. His wife was wearing the $3,000 sapphire necklace. Then my brother opened my liquor cabinet. My grandfather's scotch collection. 14 bottles, worth $200 to $200 each, collected since the 1960s. They cracked them open like cheap whiskey. I didn't drive up that night. I went to the county sheriff's office the next morning with my deed, security footage, and photos of everything. I filed a burglary report. The deputy watched the footage and his jaw dropped. "Your own brother? Not anymore," I said. He said they needed 72 hours to coordinate with the prosecutor, but they'd come to make the arrest. I just had to give the signal. I spent those 72 hours planning. I drove to the lodge while they were out hiking, tracked them on Instagram, and made modifications. Disconnected the landline, installed a cell signal jammer in the attic. The mountain already had terrible reception. With the jammer, it was a dead zone. I also swapped things. Took grandfather's real scotch, left cheap bottles filled with tea. Took mom's real jewelry, left cubic zirconia fakes. I wanted to see how long before they noticed they were living in a house of lies. On the third night, I drove up at 9:00 p.m. The house was blazing with lights, music pumping. They were throwing a party in my house. I walked in with my key. The music died. My brother was holding a beer surrounded by his wife's family. His face went from confusion to rage. "What the hell are you doing here?" I looked around. My furniture was gone. Their cheap furniture was everywhere. They'd repainted my bedroom. "I live here. What are you doing here?" His wife stood up. "I thought you said your parents left you both this house." My brother's face went red. "It's a family property situation. He's just being difficult like always." I held up my phone with the deed. "Not complicated. This house is in my name. I paid $340,000 for it. I never gave you permission." My brother lost it. Started screaming, calling me a parasite, saying our parents would be ashamed. His father-in-law puffed his chest. "We're not going anywhere. Your brother has just as much right." "He has 0 rights," I said. "But please call the police." My brother grabbed his phone, shaking with rage. Dialed 911 on speaker. Nothing. No signal. He tried again. Nothing. His wife tried hers. Her dad. Her sister frantically walked around looking for a signal. "What did you do?" my brother whispered. I smiled and sat in my leather armchair, the one piece they hadn't moved. Red and blue lights flooded the windows. 2 sheriff's cruisers in the driveway. My brother ran to the window. "You called the cops on your own brother?" 3 days ago, I filed a full burglary report. My brother sat in the back of the cruiser and stared at me through the window. Not with rage, not with shame, with something worse. Relief. Like a man who'd just been caught doing something terrible and was glad it was over. Later that night, going through the papers they'd scattered in my bedroom, I found a letter addressed to me that he'd clearly planned to leave. I opened it. The first line destroyed everything I thought I knew about why he was really there. It wasn't an apology. It was a confession. The handwriting looked rushed, like he'd written it in one sitting and couldn't bring himself to read it back. The first paragraph hit me like a brick. He'd been living out of his car for 2 months. 2 months. His in-laws had kicked him out of their house after he'd bounced 3 rent checks in a row, and instead of calling me or asking for help or, I don't know, getting an actual job, he told his wife that the lodge was shared family property, that our parents had left it to both of us, that I was just being territorial and difficult about something that was rightfully half his. She believed him. Of course she believed him. Why wouldn't she? He's her husband. He showed her photos of the place, talked about all the summers we spent there as kids, which, yeah, we did, back when our parents owned a cabin 2 hours away that they sold when I was 12. He mixed just enough truth into the lie that it sounded real. The letter went on for 2 pages, single-spaced, his handwriting getting sloppier toward the end like he was rushing to get it all out before he lost his nerve. He wrote about how he'd been sleeping in his car in a Walmart parking lot, showering at a gym he could barely afford, eating dollar menu items and telling his wife he was away on business trips. He said he'd gotten fired from his last job 4 months ago for attendance issues and hadn't told anyone. Not his wife, not her parents, nobody. He wrote, "I know you think I'm a screw-up. You're right, I am. But I didn't know what else to do." Jamie's parents were already suspicious. They kept asking questions about money, about why we couldn't afford our own place. I told them I had properties, investments, that I was waiting for the right time to liquidate. I made up an entire financial life that didn't exist. And when they said we couldn't stay with them anymore, I panicked. I remembered the lodge. I remembered you gave me the code years ago for emergencies. I figured maybe I could just stay there for a few weeks, get my head straight, figure out a plan. I was going to tell you eventually. I swear I was. I sat on the edge of the bed holding that letter, and I felt something crack open in my chest that I didn't know was still intact. Because the thing is, if he'd just called me and said he was desperate, said he needed help, I probably would have let him stay. Not with his wife's whole family, not like he owned the place, but I would have helped him. That's what kills me about the whole thing. He didn't have to lie. He didn't have to steal. He just had to ask. But he didn't. And now, here we were. I read the letter 3 times. Then I folded it, put it back in the envelope, and set it on the kitchen counter next to my keys. I didn't sleep that night. Just sat in the living room with all the lights off, staring at where they'd hung a cheap tapestry over the spot where my mom's landscape painting used to be. The next morning, I got a call from the deputy who'd been at the scene. My brother and his wife had been processed at the county station. The in-laws were issued trespass notices and told to leave the property immediately. No arrests for them, just paperwork and a very clear warning not to come back. But my brother's wife, the deputy said she'd had a breakdown in the parking lot. She didn't know, he said. We showed her the deed, the footage, everything. She had no idea the place wasn't his. Honestly, man, I felt bad for her. I didn't say anything. Her parents were pissed, he continued. They were yelling at your brother the whole time. Apparently, he'd told them he was a co-owner of multiple properties, like investment properties, real estate portfolio type stuff. I laughed. It came out hollow. He doesn't own anything. Yeah, we figured that out pretty quick. Her dad was going off about how your brother showed them bank statements, property listings, the whole 9 yards. Said he'd been planning to retire early off rental income. Bank statements? Fake ones, probably. We didn't get into it. That's between them. I thanked him and hung up. An hour later, I got a text from an unknown number. This is Jamie, your brother's wife. I didn't know. I swear I didn't know. I'm so sorry. I'm humiliated. I found out after the arrest that he lied about everything. I just want to get my stuff and leave. Can I come by? I stared at the message for a long time. I thought about ignoring it, but then I thought about the way she'd looked at me in the living room the night before, confused and defensive, like I was the one in the wrong. She genuinely believed she had a right to be there. That had to mess with your head. Finding out your whole marriage was built on lies. I texted back, "You can get your things tomorrow at 2 p.m. A deputy will be present." She replied immediately, "Thank you. I really am sorry." I didn't respond to that. The next day, she showed up right on time with a deputy and 2 suitcases. She didn't look at me, didn't say a word, just walked through the house like she was seeing it for the first time, really seeing it. She moved slowly, taking in the details, the stone fireplace, the cedar walls, the view of the lake through the big windows. She stopped in the hallway and stared at a photo on the wall. It was from when I was maybe 10, standing next to my dad by the lake with a fishing rod, both of us grinning. My brother was in the background, smaller, maybe 7, building a sandcastle. He said this was his childhood home, she said quietly. It wasn't, I said. Our parents sold that place when we were kids. This is mine. I bought it 2 years ago. She nodded slowly, still staring at the photo. He showed me this picture, said it was taken here. I believed him. She moved on, walking through the kitchen, the bedroom they'd taken over. Then she stopped in the doorway to the garage. I hadn't cleaned it up yet. The quilt was still in the corner, dusty and crumpled. The poker set was still in the box. One of the chips cracked from where they'd dropped it. My mom's jewelry, the real stuff, was back in the safe, but the empty boxes from the fakes were still on the workbench. She stood there for a full minute, staring at the quilt. He told me this place was his, she said quietly, not looking at me. He told me his parents left it to him. He said you were just bitter because you didn't get anything, that you'd always been jealous of him. I didn't respond. She turned to face me and her eyes were red. I saw him drinking that scotch. He said it was his grandfather's. He made this whole speech about legacy and family history. I thought, she stopped, swallowed. I thought he was sharing something meaningful with my parents. I didn't know he was stealing it. He was, I said. She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. My parents are furious. They're not even mad at you. They're mad at me for not seeing through it, for being stupid enough to believe him. You weren't stupid, I said. You trusted your husband. That's normal. I should have asked more questions. About the money, about the properties. He always had an excuse for why we couldn't see the rental statements, why he couldn't show me the accounts. He said it was all tied up in an LLC, that it was complicated tax stuff. She shook her head. I wanted to believe him. I wanted to believe we were okay. She loaded her bags into her car, the deputy helping with the last one. She got in the driver's seat, gripped the steering wheel, and just sat there for a minute. Then she looked at me through the window. He's still in holding, you know. They're processing him for arraignment tomorrow. I'm not bailing him out. I can't. I don't have the money, and even if I did, she stopped. I don't think I would. That's probably smart, I said. I'm filing for divorce, she said. My lawyer said it should be quick since we don't have any shared assets. Because apparently we don't have any assets at all. She started the engine and left. I went back inside and started cleaning. The lodge was a mess. They'd been there less than a week, but it looked like they'd been squatting for months. Empty beer bottles on the mantel, pizza boxes stacked by the trash, cigarette butts in a coffee mug on the deck. My bedroom had been completely redecorated. New sheets with some kind of geometric pattern I hated. New curtains that blocked out all the natural light. A cheap flat screen mounted on the wall where a painting of the Tetons used to hang. I ripped it all down, threw the sheets in a garbage bag, tore the curtains off the rod, unscrewed the TV mount and found they'd drilled right through the cedar paneling without even using anchors. Just raw screws into the wood. The holes were ugly and obvious. I went through every room, every closet, every drawer. I found more than I wanted to. A half-empty bottle of cologne on the bathroom counter, a phone charger plugged in by the bed, a pair of his shoes in the hallway, the same Nikes he'd worn in high school. I picked one up and just looked at it. The sole was worn through on the right heel, the laces frayed. He'd been wearing these shoes for years, probably couldn't afford new ones. I threw them in the bag with everything else. Then I went to the liquor cabinet. Most of the bottles were accounted for. The cheap tea-filled decoys were still there, untouched except for the two they'd opened during the party. I could see where they'd tried to pour them, realized something was off and just set them aside. There was a ring on the counter where one had sat, like they'd been too confused to even put it back. But one bottle was missing entirely, the 1963. My grandfather's 1963 Macallan, the one he'd bought in person on a trip to Scotland the year before he came home from his second tour, the only time he'd ever left the country. He used to keep it in the cabinet behind the others, wrapped in tissue paper, and he'd tell me stories about the distillery, about how the guy who sold it to him said it was a good year, that it would only get better with time. He used to say he was saving it for something that deserved it. A wedding, maybe. A grandchild's birth. Something worth celebrating. He died before any of that happened. The bottle passed to my dad, who kept it in the same spot, wrapped in the same tissue paper. My dad died before he opened it too, and when I bought the lodge, I brought it with me and put it in the cabinet, thinking maybe someday I'd find the right moment. It was just gone. I tore the house apart looking for it, checked every cabinet, every closet, every bag they'd left behind. Checked the garage, the deck, even the trash bins outside. Nothing. I even checked the recycling, thinking maybe they'd finished it and tossed the bottle, but there was nothing. I called the deputy, told him about the bottle, described it in detail. The label, the year, the tissue paper wrapping, everything. He added it to the official stolen property list. We'll keep an eye out. Pawn shops, online listings, that kind of thing. But honestly, if he drank it, it's gone. I know, I said. The estimated value of everything taken or damaged was now well over the felony threshold. The deputy said they'd submit everything to the prosecutor and I'd hear back within a week. The prosecutor called me 2 days later. We've got enough for a solid case, she said. Her voice was matter-of-fact, like she did this 20 times a day. Burglary, theft, criminal trespass. He's looking at serious time if he doesn't take a deal. What kind of deal? I asked. Probably probation, restitution, community service, maybe a suspended sentence. Depends on his record. He doesn't have one. Then he'll probably walk with probation. First-time offenders usually do, especially in family cases. But he'll have to pay you back for everything. Everything. Everything on the list, including the 1963 bottle. We're valuing it at $2,400 based on recent auction comps for that year and distillery. You'll get a restitution order as part of the sentencing. What if he can't pay? Then it follows him. Garnished wages, tax refunds, whatever we can get. It doesn't go away. I thanked her and hung up. Sat in the quiet for a while, looking out at the lake. The water was still, smooth as glass. A pair of ducks floated near the shore, dipping their heads under for fish. That night, my brother left me a voicemail. I saw the notification pop up on my phone at 11:47 p.m., and I just stared at it. I didn't want to hear his voice. Didn't want to hear whatever excuse or justification or plea he'd come up with, but I played it anyway. His voice was flat, tired, not angry. I know you don't want to talk to me. I get it. But I need to explain the letter. There are things you don't know about what happened after Mom and Dad died. Things I should have told you a long time ago, He paused. I could hear him breathing, slow and heavy. Just listen before the court date. Please. That was it. No details, no explanation. Just a vague plea for me to hear him out. I played the message 3 more times. Then I deleted it. I didn't want to know. I didn't care. Whatever sob story he had lined up, whatever justification he thought would make this okay, I didn't want to hear it. He'd made his choices. Now he had to live with them. But the message stuck with me, kept playing in my head on a loop for the next few days. I'd be doing something normal, making coffee, reading, staring at the lake, and I'd hear his voice again. There are things you don't know. A week later, while I was sorting through the papers they'd left scattered all over the house, I found a bank statement in my brother's name. It was folded in half, tucked inside a grocery store flyer like he'd been trying to hide it. I unfolded it. The balance was $11.37. Underneath it, there was a stack of unopened mail, all addressed to him, all forwarded from an address I didn't recognize. Debt collection notices from 3 different agencies. A letter from a storage facility threatening to auction the contents of a delinquent unit. A notice from a credit card company about a charged-off account. $4,200 past due, sent to collections. There was a letter from a car title loan place with final notice stamped in red across the top. The amount due was $1,800. The letter said if he didn't pay within 10 days, they'd repossess the vehicle. I checked the date. The 10 days had passed 2 months ago. I stacked the papers neatly on the counter and stared at them. $11. That's what he had. That's what he'd been living on when he broke into my lodge and told his wife it was half his. I thought about the cologne in the bathroom, the cheap flat screen, the new sheets. I thought about the party they'd thrown, the beer and pizza and music. Where'd he get the money for that? I checked the bank statement again. There was a deposit 3 days before the party, $350. The memo said, personal loan, J.M., Jamie, his wife. She'd given him money, probably thinking it was for something legitimate. Rent, groceries, gas, and he'd spent it on a party. I set the statement down and walked away. Didn't feel angry, didn't feel anything in particular. Just this weird blankness, like staring at a wall and waiting for it to tell you something it never will. 3 weeks later, I got a call from a relative I hadn't spoken to in years. My mom's cousin, someone who used to send us birthday cards with $5 bills inside when we were kids. I heard about what happened, she said. Her voice was gentle, careful. I just wanted to check in, see how you're doing. I'm fine, I said. I heard your brother's wife filed for divorce. I didn't know that. When? Last week, I think. It's moving fast because they don't have any shared assets. He didn't have anything in his name. I absorbed that. Thought about Jamie sitting in her car outside the lodge, gripping the steering wheel. Okay, look, she said, her voice softening even more. I know things are complicated, but maybe you could let it go, for the family's sake. Your brother's going through a lot, and I hung up. Blocked the number, went back to refinishing the deck. The court date was set for mid-November, 2 weeks before Thanksgiving. I didn't want to go. I thought about just letting the prosecutor handle it, staying home, moving on. But something pulled me there. Maybe I needed to see it end. Maybe I just needed to look him in the eye one more time. I walked into the courtroom and saw my brother sitting at the defendant's table with a public defender, a young guy in an ill-fitting suit who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. My brother had lost weight, a lot of weight. His jacket didn't fit right anymore, hung off his shoulders like he'd borrowed it from someone bigger. The collar of his shirt was loose around his neck. His face looked hollow, cheekbones sharp, eyes sunken. I sat in the back and watched. The judge called the case. The prosecutor laid out the charges. The public defender asked for leniency, cited my brother's lack of prior record, his cooperation with the investigation, his apparent remorse. My brother stood when the judge asked him if he wanted to make a statement. I'm sorry, he said, his voice cracked. I know that doesn't fix anything. I know I hurt my brother and I violated his trust. I was desperate and I made terrible choices. I'm ready to accept whatever punishment you think is fair. The judge looked at him for a long moment. Then she looked at the prosecutor, then at me. Does the victim wish to speak? She asked. The prosecutor turned around, raised her eyebrows at me. I shook my head. The judge nodded. The court accepts the defendant's plea of guilty. Sentencing is as follows: 2 years probation, 200 hours of community service, and full restitution to the victim in the amount of $8,640, covering all stolen and damaged property. Restitution payments will be made monthly at a rate determined by the probation office based on the defendant's income. The gavel came down. My brother sat down, didn't look at me, didn't look at anyone, just stared at the table in front of him. Afterward, in the courthouse parking lot, I was walking to my car when I heard his voice behind me. Hey, I stopped, turned around. He was standing a few feet away, hands in his pockets, looking at the ground. His public defender was gone. It was just him. I'm not asking you to forgive me, he said. He looked up. His eyes were red, watery. The letter. Did you read the second page? I frowned. What second page? There were 2 pages, he said quietly. I didn't staple them together. They might have gotten separated. I don't know, but there was more. Stuff you need to know. He stopped, shook his head. Just go back and check, please. Why does it matter? I asked. Because it explains why He stopped again, looked away. Just read it, please. Then he walked away, got into a beat-up Honda Accord that was idling at the curb. Jamie's car, I realized. Even though they were divorcing, she was giving him a ride. I watched them drive off, neither of them speaking, both staring straight ahead. I drove back to the lodge that night and went straight to the envelope, pulled it out from the kitchen drawer where I'd stashed it, unfolded the letter, 1 page. I checked the envelope again, shook it, nothing. I looked around the counter, the floor, then I saw it. A corner of paper sticking out from under the couch, half hidden by the leg. I pulled it out, unfolded it. Page 2. The handwriting was messier, like he'd written it in a hurry or maybe his hand was shaking. It started with an apology for not saying this sooner, for letting years go by without clearing the air. Then it explained something I didn't know. After our parents died, our dad had a second life insurance policy. A smaller one, maybe $30,000. My brother had found the paperwork in a filing cabinet a few months after the funeral, but by then, the estate had already been processed and closed. He tried to bring it up with the attorney handling everything, but the guy said the policy had been logged and distributed as part of the general assets. The payout had folded into the estate total, which meant it ended up in my inheritance because I was listed as the primary beneficiary on most of the accounts. Nobody flagged it. Nobody followed up. Nobody called my brother to ask if he wanted to contest it. It was just a number in a column, absorbed into the total and distributed according to the will. My brother wrote that he didn't know how to tell me. He didn't want to seem like he was accusing me of taking something on purpose. I hadn't known about the policy any more than he had, so he just let it go. Figured it wasn't worth the fight. Figured maybe it was fair anyway, since I'd always been the responsible one, the one who had his life together. But then he started borrowing, and borrowing more. And when I said no to the $15,000, something in him just broke. He wrote, "I'm not saying this to make you feel bad. I'm saying it because you deserve to know why I did what I did. I didn't plan to steal from you. I just convinced myself that I was owed something, that you had more than you needed and I had nothing, that maybe if I just took a little, just evened things out, it would be okay. I was wrong. I know that now. But I need you to understand that I didn't just wake up one day and decide to screw you over. I've been drowning for years, and I didn't know how to ask for help. I didn't know how to admit I was failing, so I lied. To Jamie, to her parents, to you. I built this whole fake life because I couldn't face the real one, and now it's all gone. Everything. I deserve that. I know I do, but I needed you to know the truth. I needed you to know I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I sat there on the floor for an hour, holding that letter, staring at the wall. The sun set. The room got dark. I didn't turn on the lights. The next day, I called the attorney who'd handled the estate. He was retired now, living in Florida, but I tracked down his number and called him anyway. He remembered the case, pulled the file from his records. "Yeah, there was a second policy," he said. "Smaller one. I remember now. It was processed with everything else. Your father hadn't updated his beneficiaries after your mother passed, so everything defaulted to the standard distribution outlined in the will. You were the primary on most things, so that's where it went." "Did my brother ever contact you about it?" I asked. "He might have. Let me check." I heard papers rustling. "Yeah, here it is. He called about 6 months after we closed the estate, asked about the policy. I told him it had already been distributed. He asked if there was anything he could do, and I said no, not really. The estate was settled. If he wanted to contest it, he'd need to file a separate action, but given the circumstances and the time that had passed, I didn't think it would go anywhere." "What was the policy worth?" Let's see, $28,400. Yeah, that's right. It was one of those term life policies from his employer. Pretty standard. And it all went to me? Per the will's default distribution, yes. I thanked him and hung up. $28,400. That's what my brother thought I'd taken from him. Half of what he was owed, just absorbed into my inheritance because of paperwork and default settings, and nobody asking the right questions. I sat with that for 3 days. Didn't sleep much. Just sat in the lodge, staring at the lake, watching the sun come up and go down. Thinking about him living in his car. Thinking about the $11 in his bank account. Thinking about the way he'd looked in that courtroom, hollow and defeated. On the 4th day, I logged into my bank account and transferred $14,200 to his account. Half of what the policy was worth. No message, no explanation, no phone call. I just sent it and closed the laptop. A month later, the first restitution payment came through. Automatic withdrawal, $50. It showed up on the 1st of every month after that like clockwork. The probation office had set it based on his income, which apparently wasn't much. He'd gotten a job at a warehouse, 3rd shift, making $16 an hour. I repainted the lodge over Thanksgiving weekend, sanded down the walls where they'd drilled the holes, refinished the deck, put the quilt back on the bed after getting it professionally cleaned. Cost me $200, but it came back looking almost new, the colors bright again. I reorganized the liquor cabinet with what was left. 10 bottles now instead of 14. I bought a few new ones to fill in the gaps. Nothing fancy, just decent whiskey, the kind you can drink without feeling like you're wasting something precious. The 1963 bottle was never recovered. I checked online listings every few days for the first month, searched eBay and auction sites and local pawn shops. Nothing. Either he drank it or he sold it to someone who knew what they had and wasn't going to flip it publicly. I stood in the living room one night in early December, looking at the empty space on the shelf where it used to be, and I realized I didn't care about the bottle anymore. I mean, I cared, but not the way I thought I would. I cared that my grandfather never got to open it, that he saved it his whole life for a moment that never came, that my dad did the same thing, that it sat in that cabinet for 60 years, waiting for something worth celebrating. And in the end, it got stolen and probably chugged at a party free by people who didn't even know what it was. That's what hurt. Not the money, the waste. I poured myself a glass of the cheap stuff and sat in the armchair by the fire. The flames crackled. The lake was frozen now, a sheet of white stretching out to the tree line. The restitution payment hit my account the next morning, $50, like clockwork. I opened my banking app and looked at the transfer I'd made. $14,200. Sent. Cleared. No way to take it back now even if I wanted to. I didn't know if it was the right thing to do. I didn't know if my brother would even understand why I did it, or if he'd just think I felt sorry for him. Maybe he'd think I was trying to ease my guilt, like I'd known about the policy all along and this was my way of making it right. But I hadn't known. That's the thing. I had no idea that money was supposed to be split. And yeah, maybe if I'd dug deeper into the estate paperwork I would have found it. But I was 28 and grieving, and I trusted the attorney to handle things fairly. None of that mattered now. What mattered was my brother had spent 6 years thinking I'd taken something from him, and instead of talking to me about it, he'd let it fester until it poisoned everything. I finished my drink and set the glass on the side table, stared at the fire until it burned down to embers. The $50 payment came again in January, and February, and March. Every month, like clockwork, a little piece of what he owed me coming back. I never reached out to him, never called, never texted. Part of me wanted to explain the transfer, wanted to hear his voice, wanted to know if he was okay, but I didn't, because I didn't think it would help. I think it would have just made things harder for both of us. So I let the payments come, let the months pass, let the lodge become mine again in a way it hadn't been since I bought it. I stood by the window one morning in late March, watching the ice on the lake start to break up, and I thought about my grandfather's bottle one last time, thought about all the years it sat waiting, all the moments it could have marked, all the celebrations it missed, and then I let it go. Thanks for watching till the end. Make sure to like and subscribe to not miss the next story.